Okay, well, thank you, Anne-Marie, for coming to talk to us about your paper today. So first off, if you can just give us a little introduction to who you are and where you're working and what your background is.
Of course, thank you for inviting me and allowing me to talk about my work. So my name is Anne-Marie Luik. I work as an assistant professor at the Department of Epidemiology of Erasmus MC. And I'm also working as a program lead at the Trimbos Institute. And in both cases, my work focuses on psychiatric epidemiology, but actually mostly on the role of sleep in mental health disorders.
Okay, great. Well, so maybe you can then tell us a little bit about your study. So it was looking at sort of overall activity on the 24-hour cycle rather than just sort of day and night separately, which is great. And then relating sort of how those work together with sleep quality. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's definitely right. So the one thing that we obviously all know, at least this audience might know, is that sleep duration does not equal good sleep. You can sleep very long and still wake up with a groggy feeling, or you can sleep very short and then still be like, oh, I'm actually all there. And then also we know that physical activity is often suggested as a topic that might affect your sleep quality. But obviously, the more and the longer you move, the less time you have for other behaviors during the day. So I cannot say I'm gonna spend 8 hours asleep, 8 hours doing strenuous physical activity, 8 hours light activity, and 8 hours of sedentary, because then I'm far beyond the 24 hours. So although people sometimes look at sleep duration and its effects, they often don't take into account these other behaviors and that these are locked in by the 24-hour day. So that is what we wanted to look at, and then especially at sleep quality, because of this notion that sleep duration is not necessarily sleep quality.
Yeah. Okay, great. So who were you then looking at? What was your population and what sort of data were you collecting? Sorry.
Sorry. So yeah, we did this study in a population-based sample, which is the Rotterdam study. This is a cohort study that has been ongoing since the 1990s. And we're actually seeing nowadays people from 40 years onwards. But for this one, we selected a subsample, which had accelerometry data, because obviously we needed that for this study. And this is a bit of an older sample. So they're on average 70 years old. Quite a spread though, because the standard deviation is 9. So there's definitely younger people than 70 in this as well. And that's actually the group we took also to, well, measure in a group that might be generalizable to the larger Dutch population, potentially also other populations across the world.
Okay, great. So then you were looking at the actigraphy primarily from, the activity primarily from the actigraphy. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this study, we only looked at the measurements from the accelerometry. We used wrist-based accelerometry in this case. So we didn't ask anyone about how much physical activity or what kind of activities they do. On the one hand, because people are quite good at remembering sports, and they really have that 1 hour of sports they do during the day. But then if you ask them further, like how long do you sit, how long did you move? That's actually really hard to guess, like your sleep duration, actually.
Yeah. And so how then did you decide what was kind of light activity over perhaps more vigorous activity?
Yeah, so this is obviously always a bit tricky because it's a wrist-worn device. It doesn't give us the full detail that we would like. Similarly, as accelerometry is not the perfect measure for sleep, also for movement, it misses a detail, but it's still a good estimator. So we know that we validated, or not we, but they have validated these measures of activity to METs, which is metabolic activity. And then they have certain cutoffs where you go, well, this is more sedentary behavior, and sedentary behavior is really more the sitting and the lying. Light physical activity, which is walking slowly, standing, doing the dishes, but nothing too vigorous, obviously. Moderate physical activity, which is like brisk walk, maybe cleaning the windows of your house, and that had like a little bit more active. And then vigorous, where you're really talking more about sports, you're getting a bit out of breath type activities. So yeah, that's how we measure them.
Okay, great. So what were your findings then? What did you find in the study?
Yeah, so actually we found potentially not that surprising that sleep duration is associated with sleep quality. This is this I think is expected, but what we also see is that sleep duration is mostly associated with a better sleep quality if it replaces sedentary behavior or light physical activity. So if you sleep more at the cost of moderate to vigorous physical activity, we see actually smaller effect sizes. So the effect is much less. So we would say if you potentially, we could argue or could speculate that if you want to improve your sleep, it's important to increase your sleep duration at the cost of light physical activity or sedentary behavior, and not necessarily at moderate to vigorous physical activity. Obviously, this is something that we need to test, right? Because we can't say anything causal on this study because it's cross-sectional data, but it might suggest that this is interesting to study. And I think I also should note there that because obviously sedentary behavior, I think a lot of sleep experts will think like, oh, well, yeah, sure, if you're removing the part where you're just lying in bed awake, which technically is sedentary behavior, sure, people will report a better sleep quality. But actually, we see this also when it replaces sedentary behavior out of bed. So it's not just merely increasing your sleep efficiency that's related to sleep quality.
Okay, great. And then you obviously mentioned that this is a sort of somewhat older population. Do you think this would be similar in different and sort of younger populations, or I guess we'd have to look into that?
Yeah, so yeah, we definitely need to look into that, because I would be quite interested in seeing that, because obviously the older population, we combined the categories of moderate and vigorous activity for a reason. Obviously, this was because of power reasons. But you might see actually, for instance, for children or adolescents, that you get these vigorous activity levels much more. So you might get a slightly different pattern as well. So obviously this is very interesting to look into the future in, for instance, children or adolescent cohorts, to see if this actually holds there as well.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, so then what are the kind of next steps for this research? Have you got plans for taking it further and perhaps looking more longitudinally?
Yeah, so no, definitely if we could do this longitudinally at some point, is interesting. We're also looking at these same compositional analysis, as we call them, so where one behavior substitutes another with other factors. So we've also published on mental health, so these associations with mental health, and we want to take this a bit further. We're now thinking of a project relating it to stroke, so we do envision to do this a bit more and really see what this could mean for the population, because if you want to give advice, and you could potentially tailor it even more than just saying, oh, well, sleep more, but keep your high activity levels as well. Don't substitute that. We think that could be beneficial in the end. Again, if the causal inference is proven. Yeah.
Great, sounds good. I look forward to reading about these future studies.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, great. Well, it's good to hear about it. Thanks very much.